Hi, my name is Cece, and on behalf of Scrapbooks on Trial, welcome to another Tutorial Tuesday. In today's project, we'll create this beautiful watercolored card, and if you look at it from the front, it gives you the impression that we've stamped one and only image, when in fact, we've stamped on 3 different panels of a card. And for this, we're going to use this new series of stamp sets by Art Impressions, and the series is called Trifolds. And in each stamp set, you have all of the stamps that you need to create this look, as well as the instructions. And for today's project, I'll be using the Lake House stamp set, and it's number UM4204 by Art Impressions. In addition to this stamp set, let me show you what you'll need to create today's project. A piece of watercolor paper that measures 5 1/4 by 11 inches, and you'll want to score your paper at 3 5/8 inches from each end. So you'll make your first score at 3 5/8, turn your paper around and do the same thing from the other end. In addition to your card base, you're going to need a piece of scrap watercolor paper, some watercolor pencils, 2 water brushes by Ranger. If you don't have watercolor pencils, you can easily use your distress inks. The other option is to use the Artist Pen Big Brush by Faber-Castell. These will dilute with water. Or you could also use the distress markers by Tim Holtz, and these will get scribbled onto an acrylic block or any non-porous surface. You could also work on your craft mat. That would work the same as well. And you'll pick the color up with your water brushes. You'll need some jet black archival ink because it's waterproof. 3 strands of 16 inches long of hemp twine, as well as a piece of cardstock that measures 5 3/4 by 5 1/4. And the cardstock can be any color that you choose. You'll also need a pair of fine tip scissors, a ruler, a pencil, and a bone folder. And if you're impatient like me, you're going to need a heat tool. Before I start coloring, I want to show you what colors of watercolor pencils I'm using. I'm using an orange one, as well as a red, fuchsia, 2 tones of blues, 3 tones of greens, a brown, a black, and a different kind of blue for one of the rowboats. Additionally, I'm going to use the Distress ink in Rusty Hinge because I did not have the perfect color for the fawn in my watercolor pencils collection. So our starting point is the 5 1/4 by 11 inch watercolor paper that we've scored at 3 5/8 from each end. And now I need to mark the placement of our stamping. For the central panel, we're going to measure 1/2 inch from the top of the card. So I'm going to put a light pencil mark right here. And then I'm going to flip my paper on the other side. And I'm going to measure on the left hand side 2 1/4 inch down from the top, close to the fold line, right here. And on the right hand side, I'm going to measure 1 1/2 inch from the top, also close to the fold line right here. So now I'm going to stamp the first image, which is the one with the house on it. And I'm using jet black ink for this because we're going to color with water, and the archival ink is waterproof. And I'm finding my mark here at the 1/2 inch, and I'm going to align the top of my stamp with the mark, and I'm going to center that image right in between the 2 fold lines, like this. Now I'm going to turn my paper over and stamp the other 2 stamps. And on the left hand side, I'm going to stamp the rowboat image. This time I'm going to align my stamp close to the fold line and the top of my stamp with the pencil mark, like so. And the last image is the one with the fawn on it. Again, using the archival ink. And this time I'll align it close to the fold line on the left hand side and the top of my image with my pencil line. Like this. So you can see my pencil line right here and right there. So now I'm going to go ahead and erase the lines before I start coloring. So this is the main image, the one that's going to be in the middle of our card. And I'm going to work one section at a time. Now this is very important because if you work two sections that are close together or adjacent, and your water hasn't had time to dry, the colors will mix. The other thing too that you need to remember about watercoloring is that it's not about precision. I want to bring in my scrap piece of paper, and I want to show you what I'm using this for. I'm going to be using the fine tip, the detail brush by Ranger. It's always also good to have a piece of paper towel handy. And I think I'm going to start with the trees. I'm going to take my 3 greens and I'm just going to scribble on that piece of scrap paper. As you can see, I had some water there, but that's okay. So I'm going to swatch my 3 values of green. And I'm going to use that piece of paper to grab my color. So there I have my lighter value. So I'm just going to use my brush here to pick up that green. As you can see, it transferred onto my brush, and I'm just going to start coloring. And as you can see, I'm not being very precise about it, and I'm also leaving some white areas. As you can see here, I've got a few white areas, and that's exactly what I want. So I'm going to color on the other side as well. In fact, I'm going to give a coat of that lime green all around my trees and foliage. Just so that I have my lightest value, like this. Now, because we're going to color over the same section and we want the greens to mix together, I'm going to pick up my next value and I'm going to put some more accents on my trees like so, in the areas where I want my trees to be darker. And again, as I said at the beginning, this is not about precision. It's more of an artsy look. Like this. And now I'm going to dip into my darker color, which is more like a grass green, and I'm going to add just a few accents here and there. Maybe close to the tree line. And if you feel that some areas are not as dark as you want them to be, don't worry, because you can always add another coat of your colors. I think I'm going to put some in here as well. I want that tree to be dark. And maybe this guy too. Like this. So it's already looking good. I might go back some more later on with more application of the green, but for now I'm gonna let it dry, or if you're impatient like me, you're gonna take your heat tool and dry this. I'm going to color the house now because this portion is dry, so I have no problems going into the sections that are close to the trees. And for this, since I didn't have the perfect rusty kind of color that I wanted, I took my Rusty Hinge Distress ink, and I have a clear acrylic block here. You can use your craft mat if you prefer. I wanted this on an elevated surface because I was afraid that I might move my paper and walk right into the color. And this is just for the purpose of this demo. If you're at home and you have the space for it, go ahead and use your craft mat. So I've got my color right here, and basically it's the same as if I were to pick it up from my scrap piece of watercolor paper. So I'm just going to pick up the color. One thing I have to tell you is that the colors you're going to get from the Distress ink are going to be a lot more vivid. As you can see here, if I start coloring the grounds, I need to get rid of a lot of the ink. But look how beautiful that is. Let me just get a closer look here. Here, I'm going to put this like that so that you can see what I'm grabbing. So now I'm going to color the back of the house, and the back of the house to me should be a little bit darker. I love what I get from the Distress inks. They're really vibrant, beautiful colors. Oops. The fun part about watercoloring is that while it's still wet, you can pick it up with your fingers if you've put some ink that doesn't belong where it fell. So, like this here. And I think I'm going to cover up the bottom portion of the windows with just a little bit of that ink, like so. Look how pretty that is already. Now let me show you another background technique. Instead of adding our grass here directly onto, picking up the color and directly adding it to the dry paper, I'm just going to wet the area where I want the grass to be. And now I'm going to pick up the color, and you'll see that as soon as I add the color, it's going to distribute the color everywhere where I put the water. And that's another way of doing a more blended background. And as you can see, as I keep adding the colors, they're going to be restrained within that area where I put the water. It's not going to go past that water line that I just added. So that's just another way of doing a more subtle background, if I want to say it that way. Okay, so now that we've finished coloring our stamped images, so we have 2 on this side and 1 in the middle, we're going to cut out these 2 images. We want to have some sort of a peekaboo effect so that when we fold back those panels, it'll look like one single image. So we need to cut around the boats and we need to cut around that image as well. I'll cut into my cardstock this way, and then I'll cut around the image to end here and then cut along the fold like so. So your piece should look like this, and now we're going to score on our fold lines with the center panel facing you. You're going to fold this piece in and this piece like so. And there's our image, and I'm just going to zoom in so you can see. There's one more thing that we need to do, but I just wanted to give you a snapshot of what it would look like. Now we need to stamp our sentiment in the middle, and I'm going to go ahead and do that with the archival ink in jet black as well. Right here in the center. Well, as you can see, I smudged my stamping just a little bit, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp it on another one of the remnants of the watercolor paper, and I'm just going to cut around it. There we go, much better. I'm just going to cut this piece out. I think I'm going to bring in my vintage photo distress ink and just ink around the edges, just so it doesn't look white on white. So when things are not perfect, you don't stress out, you just turn to plan B, like I just did. And there we go. Actually, it looks kind of cute like that. Just gonna glue this on. I don't want to pop this just because it would add dimension that I don't need. But there we go. It looks good. And there is our finished card. Fun, isn't it? Because we worked on watercolor paper and we added some water, the cardstock has warped a little bit. So I think it would benefit from a backing to make it sturdier. But before I do that, I want to have some kind of a closure to this card. So I have my 3 strands of 16 inches of hemp twine, and I'm going to just wrap this around my card. And for now, I'm not too concerned about the placement of the twine. So I'm just going to make a bow. Like so. I'm going to adjust the bows. And you can fiddle around with it as long as you want until you're completely satisfied. I'm just going to, I won't be fiddling around too much just for the sake of this video. And I'm not going to cut the strands because the person who receives it will want to open and close it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the bow is at the right spot, and I'm going to fan out each length like this, and when I'm happy with how it looks in the front, I'm going to turn it over, and I'll take my sequin tape and place a length of tape right up to the edge on all four sides, and this will hold our hemp twine in place so that it won't move when the person unties the bow. And I'm going to bring in my cardstock and just lay it down on the cardstock. Now, the measurements that I gave you are not exactly the same as our card, just because we have fold lines, and that's fine as long as it is larger and that it is smaller. And then you can just trim off the edges with your scissors. Just be careful not to cut the twine. I might just trim the bottom as well. Like this. And there you have it. Now it's a little bit sturdier. It's still a little bit warped, but it is definitely sturdier, so that when the person opens the card and it stands on its own like this, it is definitely a lot sturdier. Well, that concludes our tutorial for today. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I'm really in love with this card. It is different. The watercoloring is just so nice. The images are amazing. And I'm definitely going to take a look at all the other stamp sets that we got from that series. I love this little fawn. I think he's just too cute. So as usual, thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!